working our way through Habakkuk and Zephaniah now, considering those two books together. And this one we are entitling Judah Must Fall. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 1 through 12. I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and I will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I'm reproved. And the Lord answered me and said, Write the vision, and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. Yea, also, because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his? How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay? Shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them? Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land of the city, and of all that dwell therein. Woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of evil. Thou hast consulted shame to thy house by cutting off many people, and hast sinned against thy soul. For the stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer it. Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood, and establisheth a city by iniquity. So we're in Habakkuk, in the minor prophets. Let's get a little bit of historical backdrop again, see what you remember. The monarchy. What king did the monarchy start under? Saul. What tribe was he from? Benjamin, good. Who did it pass to from there? David of what tribe? Judah. David's son Solomon becomes the next king. Who becomes king after Solomon? Rehoboam. Excellent. What does Rehoboam do in his very first business meeting? Splits the kingdom. 10 tribes stay in the north and call themselves Israel. 2 tribes remain in the south. Judah and Benjamin call themselves by the name of Judah, the larger of the 2 tribes. They diverge in history after that point. How many good kings did the northern kingdom of Israel ever have? None, absolutely none. And who do they eventually fall to? Assyria, good. That's who most of the minor prophets have been speaking of so far up until we get to Habakkuk. Others have mentioned a bit, but Assyria has been the main focus. Judah lasts 136 years longer. Who do they eventually fall to? Babylon, also known as the Chaldeans, and that is what Habakkuk is all about. It's about the fall of Judah to Babylon. He knows that it's coming. Habakkuk had come to God very upset about all the iniquity and violence that God was making him see in Judah. In response, God informed Habakkuk that he knew all about it and had raised up the Chaldean Empire to come against Judah and punish them for their wickedness. Well, Habakkuk then changed his tune dramatically. He was absolutely aghast that God would judge Judah by the means of people who were far more wicked than they were. He closed that part of his conversation with God with these words in Habakkuk 1:17. Shall they, meaning the Chaldeans, therefore empty their nets and not spare continually to slay the nations? Chapter 2 is going to show Habakkuk waiting for a response from God to the question he just raised. So notice first of all a watching prophet. Chapter 2, verse 1. I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I'm reproved. A unique habit of prophets seen throughout the Old Testament is that when they were waiting for or anticipating an answer from the Lord, they would withdraw themselves from others so that God could speak to them without them being distracted. Here's 3 examples, one from a rather unique source. Numbers 23:3. And Balaam said unto Balak, Stand by thy burnt offering, and I will go. Peradventure the Lord will come to meet me, and whatsoever he showeth me I will tell thee. And he went to an high place. Exodus 19:3. And Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel. 1 Kings 19:9. And he came thither unto a cave, and lodged there. And behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, and he said unto him, What doest thou here, Elijah? So Habakkuk now seems to be doing the same thing. He retreats to a watchtower, which was utterly fitting since the prophets were the watchmen on the wall for Israel and Judah's souls. Twice in verse 1, Habakkuk uses the word watch. He fully expects God to send an answer to his question, and he's therefore paying attention for that answer to come. When it comes, he seems to already know of what nature the answer will be, because we see him saying, and will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am, what's the word? Reproved. To his credit, Habakkuk does not expect God to coddle him. He expects God to correct him. We do well to watch for God to answer in our lives. We do better when we expect that many of those answers will come in the form of corrections. We do better still when we're willing to receive and be changed by those corrections. So you've got a watching prophet, but then there's a wait prescribed in verse 2. And the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. Habakkuk retired from the public for a time, put himself in a position of waiting for an answer from the Lord, and the answer came. When it came by voice and by vision, and with a command that Habakkuk write it all down. The instruction God gave Habakkuk concerning the writing is really interesting. He said, make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. God was commanding Habakkuk to write the vision of the future down on stone tables, and to do so in such plain, legible writing that a person could read it while they were running. Now, can you imagine how difficult it is to read something that you're holding in your hand while you're running? If you want to put that to the test, when you go home this afternoon, whatever book you happen to be reading, take it and grab it and go outside for a run around the block and try your best to read that book while you're running. It's really hard to even get a single word, much less a single line like that. Why in the world would God make that demand of Habakkuk concerning this writing? Well, mostly because there would come a day when the people, the Babylonians, would in fact be running for their lives, and would be very well instructed by the prophecy that God gave concerning it and why it had all happened. Verse 3, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and shall not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. The vision God was getting ready to tell Habakkuk about was the judgment that would fall on the Chaldeans, the very Chaldeans that God was sending against Judah to punish them for their iniquity. This vision was indeed for an appointed time. The Chaldeans would take Judah. God had decreed for it to happen. Judah would be in captivity for 70 years, but only for 70 years, because after that, God would see them released, and the Chaldeans themselves would be judged. Now, that had to seem like forever to Habakkuk. That's why God went on to say, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. This was God's way of saying in so many words, all of this is completely true. I'm not lying about any of it. So even though it seems like it'll be forever away, wait for it. Tell your people to wait for it, because redemption from captivity, the destruction of the Babylonians, will absolutely come. And though you seem to think it's going to take forever, it will not take one day longer than I've intended. So you got a watching prophet and a wait prescribed. Then there's a woe promise beginning verse 4. Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. Now there's a legitimate debate concerning verse 4, namely the question of who is being referred to in the first phrase. Who exactly is God speaking about when he says, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him? The two most commonly espoused views are that it refers to the Chaldeans or to the unbelieving Jews who refused to believe the word of God through the prophets. In context, it seems to me to clearly refer to the Chaldeans in the first half of verse 4 as opposed to the Jews, those of Judah who believed in God and would therefore be redeemed from their captivity in the second phrase of verse 4. The pride and the lack of uprightness that the first half of verse 4 describes accurately describe the Chaldean Empire. Especially under Nebuchadnezzar, pride was their defining characteristic, and it produced a shocking lack of uprightness. You see, when people, at least in practice, believe that they are God, then they become their own standards, and you find bad things happening every single time. It's in the final phrase of verse 4, though, that the prophecy of the Old Testament and the doctrine of the New Testament join hands. Habakkuk said, but the just shall live by his faith. Does that phrase sound familiar? Should, because it's mentioned 3 times in the New Testament. Habakkuk, of all people, being quoted 3 times in the New Testament. Romans 1:17, for therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith. Galatians 3:11, but that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God, it is evident, for the just shall live by faith. Hebrews 10:38, now the just shall live by faith, but if any man draw back, my soul shall have no pleasure in him. When Habakkuk wrote those words, he likely had no idea how significant they would become to the generations far beyond his own. Indeed, he likely couldn't have imagined that the entire world would lay hold on them and the eternal destiny of mankind depended on them. In his day, it would be the just, the justified, who lived rather than died because of their faith. God would destroy the disbelieving Chaldeans, but he would preserve the believing Jews. In outgrowth, it would be those believing Jews who lived out their faith once they've been preserved from destruction by their faith. Now, all that fits really well with the New Testament model of salvation. If we're justified, it will only be by faith. And if we are justified by faith, we will live out that faith. So it's true on both ends of that. Look at verses 5 and 6. Yea, also, because he transgresseth by wine, he's a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his? How long? And him that ladeth himself with thick clay. Verses 5 and 6 make up one very long sentence, and the vision now turns squarely to the Babylonians. They are the people they as a people are the ones being referred to by the singular pronoun he in verse 5, and the descriptions to follow through the end of verse 6. In verse 4, we found the Babylonians were proud and arrogant. In these verses, we find an additional litany of charges against them. The first charge mentioned against them, both evident from Scripture and history, is that they were drunkards. You famously remember in Daniel chapter 5, Belshazzar losing the kingdom to the Medes and the Persians, largely because everybody's drunk, nobody's paying attention to what they're doing outside the walls. The second charge, echoing that of verse 4, is that they were marked by pride. The third charge, found in the words, neither keepeth at home, is that they did not tend to the home front. They were so absorbed with new conquests that they neglected their duties at home. In fact, Belshazzar wasn't really the king. Belshazzar the king was subject to his father, the king, Nabonidus, who was away at war. He was in a conquest while his own kingdom was falling, so he's just the acting king. So nobody's paying attention to the home front, and it falls. This happens a lot in homes and nations and ministries and everything else. People have their eyes so far afield that they don't pay attention to what's going on right there under their noses. This charge, Habakkuk himself had echo, or rather the fourth charge is found on the four complementary phrases that follow the third charge. Here it is, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Now, Habakkuk has already mentioned this about the Chaldeans in chapter 1. They were never satisfied. They were intent on conquering all the earth. They looked at human beings like they were just fish of the sea, beasts of the field, just to be gathered and destroyed and eaten or used for their pleasure. Verse 6 gives us the shall not that answers the because of verse 5, saying, shall not all these people and nations you treated so cruelly, take up a parable against him, against Babylon, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his. How long? And him that ladeth himself with thick clay. When Babylon fell, they'd be mocked by all the people of the earth, because all the people of the earth had been the unwilling beneficiaries of their utter cruelty. Their taunt would contain a choice bit of mockery about the appearance of the Chaldeans on that day. For as long as anybody living could remember, the Chaldeans had laded themselves with gold and silver and jewels. On that day, all those baubles would be taken, and the Chaldeans would, as it were, be packing mud on their face and head to make themselves look beautiful, because they couldn't afford anything better, and they no longer had the power to take from others. So everybody's mocking them because of this. Verse 7, shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them? For nearly 100 years, starting with the reign of Nabopolassar, nobody had much risen up suddenly or bitten or vexed the Babylonians. When it came their time to fall, God promised that nations would indeed rise up suddenly against them because they no longer feared retribution. They would bite the Babylonians where previously they'd been devoured by the Babylonians. They'd been asleep in their weakness for generations. They would now awake and vex their tormentors. They'd been the booty of the Babylonians. The Babylonians would now be their booty, their spoil to take. Verse 8, because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land, and of the city, and of all that dwell therein. Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown espoused this one beautifully. They said, "Those remaining of the people spoiled by thee, though but a remnant, will suffice to inflict vengeance on thee." See, for a long time, Babylon had been the scourge of the earth. They had spoiled nation after nation after nation after nation. They had been violently spilling the blood of those people along the way. Unfortunately for them, those nations still had a remnant of survivors, people who still remembered what had been done to parents and grandparents and nations. When the Medes and the Persians finally teamed up to topple Babylon, they found both willing allies and vocal cheerleaders in their attempt. Verse 9, "Woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of evil." Now, it's easy to see the intentional repetitiveness in the first part of verse 9. Both in English and Hebrew, the words for covet are the same, with ra, evil, added to them. This is for emphasis. It'd almost be like if we describe somebody as a murderous, evil murderer. You think, well, you're being really redundant there. No, we're emphasizing the quality that is so bad about them. The covetousness of the country and the empire was legendary. It was also purposeful. It was with the intent of setting their kingdom nest so far on high that they could never be toppled. They wanted to forever be the ones inflicting evil on others and always be safe from the tables being turned on themselves. I know we're the senior, the adult class in here. How many of you can remember back to junior high and high school at least a little bit? Do you remember the bullies in junior high and high school? You know what they always wanted? They always wanted to be the one who was able to bully others. Can you remember some times when the tables ended up being turned? You remember the time when they realized there was somebody stronger? Wasn't it even better when it was somebody that used to be weaker and grew up and became stronger? This is what happens to Babylon. Babylon has bullied people for generations, and all of a sudden these nations are growing stronger while they're growing weaker, and they ended up finding out, even though they tried their best with all their conquest to stop it, they ended up finding out that the tables do turn on things like that. Verse 10, "Thou hast consulted shame to thy house by cutting off many people, and hast sinned against thy soul." Now, unique pictures painted in verse 10. It's the picture of the Babylonians around their table of authority, taking counsel together as to the best means of cutting off many people of the earth. They believe that they're consulting together to bring glory to their house. Instead, they're unintentionally consulting to bring shame to their house, and they're sinning against their own soul. It was God who raised up those nations that they were so casually plotting the destruction of, including Judah. And that God would make sure that the tables turned on the ones doing so. They'd sinned against their own soul, and God would call the debt due in their own blood and ruin. Verses 11 and 12. "For the stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer it. Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood, and establisheth a city by iniquity." Now, though there's a period between verses 11 and 12, please understand these verses go together. There's a literary device you should be familiar with that has taken place in verses 11 and 12. Let me read it to you again. See if you can figure out what literary device is being used. "For the stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer it." What literary device is being used? Who said that? Personification. Personification, good, Brother Tony. Personification, that's when you take something that is non-living and assign it living qualities as if it's a human. This is the stone crying out of the wall. This is the beam out of the timber answering the stone because it's heard in this little bit of personification. What's going on with this? Well, notice what the beams and the stones and the wall are crying. "Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood, and establisheth a city by iniquity." So the stones and beams and structures of Babylon are pictured as saying and crying out, "Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood, and establisheth a city by iniquity." The building was being disgusted at the builders. The materials knew the depravity of the men who gathered and assembled them, and knew the lives that had been so casually slaughtered en masse just so it could be turned into lovely structures, gaudy eye candy for the proud Chaldeans. God is saying, even the lifeless materials of your city is disgusted by what you have done. And if the lifeless materials of your city is disgusted by what you've done, how much more do you think their creator is disgusted by what you've done? Habakkuk went to a watching place, and God answered. When he did, Habakkuk, who seemed to think that God had missed some things, and don't we get there very often? Habakkuk, who seemed to think God had missed some things, realized he'd actually missed nothing at all. In fact, God knew the setting and the score better than he did, and he would in his own time act accordingly. I wonder, though, how often are we just like Habakkuk? How often do we look around at our own lives or the wider world around us and get the idea that God has somehow missed all the wickedness taking place? He's somehow missed what's been done to us. He's missed what's been done to innocent Christians and sweet people around the world. God's missed all that. We need to go to him. We need to inform him of all that. How often do we wish that we were the ones in charge of the lightning bolts? None of that's necessary. For 6,000 years now, evil men have consistently either met their judgment in this life or eternity. God hasn't missed any of them. For 6,000 years now, evil empires have risen and then been wrecked. God, in baseball terms, is batting 1,000 on this. So relax. He'll settle it all.